Milo sat on the cold pavement, his tail twitching in the stagnant air of the city street. The concrete beneath him pulled the warmth from his body, a sharp contrast to the humid night. Above, the street lamp buzzed a rhythmic, mechanical drone that had provided the only constant for hours. Then, the sound stuttered. The light flickered once, twice, and died. The sudden absence of illumination hit like a physical weight, pressing the darkness against the brickwork. Milo stood up, his claws clicking sharply against the hard surface as he shifted his weight. He turned his head, ears swiveling to catch the slightest vibration in the silence. He took another step forward, deeper into the black. Milo pressed his nose to the damp concrete, searching for a scent that did not belong. The alley floor was littered with grit and discarded paper, but the air held a faint metallic tang. He took a cautious step, his paws silent on the wet stone. Nothing. He circled back, his whiskers twitching. Then, a faint luminescence caught his eye. He stopped, his body freezing in place. Etched into the dark, damp earth were footprints, but they were not made of mud or dust. They were glowing with a sharp, rhythmic blue light. Each print pulsed like a dying star, casting a cold radiance that illuminated the cracks in the pavement. Milo leaned closer, his ears flattened against his head as he inspected the strange markings. They were small, precise, and impossible. Milo did not hesitate. He stepped into the first glowing print, feeling a slight tingle against his pads, and began to follow the trail. The blue trail ended abruptly behind a rusted, overflowing dumpster. Milo slowed his pace, his tail low and sweeping the wet ground. He crept around the jagged metal edge, his whiskers brushing against the cold, damp brick of the alley wall. He stopped. A soft, golden radiance spilled across the floor, cutting through the gloom. Huddled in the corner was a small, translucent figure, its form flickering like a candle flame in a draught. It was shivering, each tremor sending ripples of light across its surface. Beside it lay a metallic box, cracked down the center, its internal gears exposed and jammed in a twisted tangle of wire. The box emitted a weak, stuttering hum that matched the creature's erratic breathing. Milo stood perfectly still, his ears twitching. The creature looked up, its eyes wide and reflecting the golden glow. It did not run. It pressed itself tighter against the brick. Milo stepped forward, his paws making no sound on the grit. He could see the mechanical failure clearly now. The box was dead. The air in the alley suddenly turned frigid, turning Milo's breath into a thin white mist. He felt the hair along his spine rise, stiffening into a ridge of warning. The golden light from the creature flickered violently, struggling against a new, encroaching darkness. On the brick wall directly behind the shivering figure, a patch of shadow began to ripple. It was not a reflection. It was a dense, oily void that detached itself from the mortar, stretching upward like ink spreading through water. The shadow grew, its edges jagged and uneven, casting a suffocating weight over the narrow space. It moved with a slow, deliberate grace, sliding across the ground until it stood directly over the translucent creature. The creature pressed itself into the brick, its golden glow now reduced to a faint, desperate pulse. The shadow loomed, a formless, towering presence that seemed to drink the remaining light from the alley. It did not strike immediately. It hovered as the shadow extended a long, thin tendril toward the creature. The alley felt smaller, the walls closing in as the entity prepared to extinguish the last of the golden radiance. The shadow tendril hovered inches from the creature, its surface shimmering with a cold, unnatural hunger. Milo could not wait. His muscles coiled tight, every fiber of his body vibrating with a singular, desperate intent. He shifted his weight, his back claws finding purchase in the uneven concrete. The shadow began to descend, its mass folding inward as if to consume the golden light entirely. Milo did not think. He launched himself from the darkness. He cleared the space between the dumpster and the wall in a single blurred leap. As he hit the ground, he unleashed a sharp, piercing hiss that echoed off the damp brickwork like a whip crack. The sound was raw and defiant, cutting through the suffocating silence of the alley. He swiped his paws through the center of the shadow, his claws raking through the oily void. The entity shuddered, its form rippling under the sudden impact of his aggression. It recoiled, the tendrils snapping back as if burned by the contact. It turned, a dark, swirling mass of malice, and fixed its attention on Milo. Milo now stood directly in the path of the void, his back arched. The shadow surged forward, a wave of ink-black cold that threatened to swallow the alley whole. Milo held his ground for a heartbeat, his tail lashing behind him before he pivoted on his hind legs. He needed distance. He needed to pull the entity away from the glowing creature. To his left, a stack of rotted wooden crates sat precariously against the wall. He scrambled toward them, his claws skittering across the slick pavement. The shadow followed, its form elongating as it accelerated, a silent predator closing the gap with terrifying speed. Milo reached the crates and threw his entire weight against the base. The wood groaned, splintering under the sudden impact. The crates tipped, teetered for a fraction of a second, and then collapsed with a thunderous, rhythmic crash that shattered the silence of the alley. Milo was already gone, darting through the narrow gap between the dumpster and the wall, circling back toward the creature. Milo skidded to a halt beside the shivering creature, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. He ignored the encroaching darkness behind him and focused entirely on the metallic box. It lay on its side, a jagged crack running down its casing, with a vital gear hanging loose from its housing. He pressed his nose against the cold metal, nudging the gear toward the slot. It caught on a burr of rusted steel and stuck. He pushed harder, digging his claws into the pavement for leverage, his muscles straining against the resistance. With a sharp, metallic click, the gear snapped into place. The box shuddered. A low, rhythmic hum began to emanate from its core, growing rapidly in volume. A brilliant, blinding beam of white light erupted from the center of the device, cutting through the alley like a searing blade. The shadow, caught in the sudden radiance, let out a silent, frantic ripple before its form began to unravel. It dissolved into wisps of smoke. The creature chirped, a sound of pure relief, and leaped into the open compartment of the box. The device lifted off the ground, hovering with a steady, powerful grace. It began to rise, pulling away from the damp earth, leaving the alley empty and silent as the last traces of the shadow vanished into the air. The blinding white light faded, leaving behind a lingering warmth that clung to the damp brick walls. Milo sat back on his haunches, his chest heaving as he watched the box drift upward. Above the alley, the street lamp buzzed with a sharp electric crackle. It flickered once, twice, and then held steady, casting a soft, golden glow over the trash-filled ground. The darkness that had dominated the space was gone. Milo tracked the box as it rose higher, clearing the jagged silhouette of the rooftops. It moved with a smooth, silent grace. Higher it went, turning into a small, pulsing point of light against the vast, ink-black canvas of the sky. It did not waver. It simply climbed, weaving between the distant, unblinking stars until it became indistinguishable from the constellations themselves, leaving behind only the steady, rhythmic buzz of the street lamp and the cool, damp scent of the pavement. Milo turned away from the alley, his paws padding softly against the cooling asphalt. He walked with a measured, deliberate pace, his tail held low as he navigated the familiar route back to his porch. The street was quiet. The only sound, the rhythmic click of his claws against the concrete. He reached his wooden mat, the surface rough and cool beneath his weight. He sat down, tucked his tail around his feet, and began to groom his shoulder. His tongue rasped against his fur, but he stopped mid-stroke. A faint, shimmering blue light clung to his side, pulsing in perfect, steady time with his own heartbeat. He stared at the glow, his pupils dilating in the dim porch light. The light was not fading, it was breathing. It cast a soft, ethereal outline against the dark wood of the porch. He shifted his position, curling into a tight ball to protect the warmth radiating from his side. His eyes remained fixed on the vast, empty sky. The blue glow continued its steady rhythm, a silent internal pulse that connected him to the stars above. Milo let out a long, slow breath, his muscles relaxing into the wood. The blue shimmer flickered once more, then settled into the deep, dark texture of his fur.